The FIA has just admitted they made a serious mistake and issued a public apology to Oscar Piastri after reviewing his penalty in Brazil. That 10-second penalty didn't just ruin his race, it could cost him the 2025 World Championship. Behind closed doors, McLaren knew the truth all along, and now the FIA's statement confirms what they've been arguing from the start. With only 3 races to go, Piastri is chasing Norris with everything on the line, and now, he's got the entire paddock watching his comeback. The Formula One world is reeling after the FIA did something almost unthinkable. It admitted a serious mistake and publicly apologized to Oscar Piastri. Following the chaos of the Brazilian Grand Prix, and a controversial 10-second penalty that derailed his race, the sport's highest authority has now confirmed the decision was flawed. That penalty, served during a crucial phase of the race, wasn't just a footnote, it was a judgment that may have altered the outcome of an entire championship. And for Piastri, who handled the incident with professionalism and composure, the apology brings some closure but no points. Brazil was meant to be Piastri's counterpunch. After losing ground in the sprint race due to bad luck and a compromised strategy, he arrived on Sunday knowing he had to deliver. The car was there. The confidence was building. And early in the race, he looked aggressive and sharp. But then came lap 6. A marginal move down the inside of Kimi Antonelli into turn 1. A squeeze. Contact. Chaos. Leclerc's race over. Antonelli fuming. And before McLaren could even submit telemetry, the stewards handed down the ruling, 10 seconds to Oscar Piastri for causing a collision. The decision left fans stunned. McLaren stunned. Piastri, over team radio, kept his cool, but the frustration was clear in his voice. He asked for a review, but race control had already made up its mind. The team knew what the data showed. They had the GPS overlays, the brake traces, the onboard. It was a racing incident, maybe even avoidable but not reckless. And now, days later, the FIA's own analysis agrees. They admit the incident was not as one-sided as initially judged. They apologize. But it's too late to change the standings. That's the painful part. Because that penalty dropped Piastri from a likely podium finish, perhaps even second place, down to 5th. 10 full seconds erased a drive that had championship-level execution. Meanwhile, Lando Norris extended his lead in the standings with a commanding victory. The swing? 15 points. And in a season this tight, that's the difference between entering the final 3 rounds as the hunter or the hunted. Piastri is now 24 points behind Norris. And while the math still gives him a chance, the margin for error has vanished. From the moment the lights went out at Interlagos, Oscar Piastri looked locked in. The Australian launched cleanly, held his line through the Senna S, and avoided the kind of first-lap chaos that so often defines a Grand Prix at this historic circuit. In the early phases, he trailed just behind Norris and Sainz, sitting in a perfect position to pounce once tire strategies and safety cars came into play. But it was lap 6 that delivered the twist no one saw coming. A restart. Cold tires. And a marginal gap that Piastri saw as his chance to stay in the title fight. Kimi Antonelli, brilliant, aggressive, but still inexperienced, moved slightly right under braking into turn 1. Piastri, reading the space, darted to the inside. It was a late lunge, yes, but not reckless. As both cars rotated into the apex, Antonelli's car was unsettled, likely due to a delayed steering input, and the contact was light wheel to side pod. But the chain reaction behind was catastrophic. Charles Leclerc, with nowhere to go, got collected in the fallout. His car spun into the barriers. Race over. A potential Ferrari double points finish? Gone in seconds. What happened next was decisive. Before McLaren could even submit their full data, the stewards issued a 10-second time penalty to Piastri for causing a collision. No thorough review. No red flag to allow time for analysis. It was the kind of rapid judgment that often prioritizes optics over accuracy. For McLaren, it was déjà vu, a snap decision that felt more like reaction than reason. Piastri, ever composed, simply replied on the radio. He moved under braking. I had nowhere to go. The penalty changed everything. 10 seconds at Interlagos is more than a time loss, it's a strategic kill shot. It meant Piastri's pit strategy had to be rebuilt from scratch. It meant he would lose track position and be forced to overtake in traffic, potentially degrading his tires faster. But more than anything, it meant a psychological blow in the middle of a race he was controlling with quiet precision. That one moment, that one call, flipped the momentum in the title fight. In the aftermath, replays and overlays from multiple angles showed a very different picture than what the stewards had based their ruling on. Antonelli's movement was late. The space Piastri went for existed. And telemetry proved that he was well within braking range. It wasn't wild. It was brave. It was calculated. It was, by all accounts, a racing move. And now, with the FIA's own review backing that perspective, the original ruling has been reduced to a cautionary tale of premature judgment. And so, the story shifts. From a penalty that many fans saw as excessive, to a formal apology that may go down as one of the defining moments of the 2025 season. Because this wasn't just about a mistake, it was about timing, process, and fairness. It was about a driver being punished not for recklessness, but for racing instinct. And when that happens at the highest level, it affects more than a result. It affects reputations. It shakes trust. But for Oscar Piastri, it also lights a fire, one that the rest of the grid now has every reason to fear. As soon as the penalty was issued, McLaren's pit wall pivoted into crisis mode. 10 seconds is a mountain in modern Formula One, especially at a high-degradation track like Interlagos, where strategy windows are narrow and tire wear punishes aggression. Andrea Stella and the engineers recalibrated everything. They delayed Piastri's pit stop to keep him in clean air, stretching the first stint on mediums to protect track position and allow the race to settle. It was a bold move, and it demanded absolute control from the driver behind the wheel. Piastri delivered with total focus. He immediately began managing tire temperatures while holding off pressure from behind. His throttle traces were smooth, his braking points consistent, and his cornering lines were deliberately shallow, especially into turn 10, where many drivers were over-rotating and burning rear grip. He knew what was at stake. The strategy wasn't about undercutting anymore, it was about controlling losses, absorbing damage, and leaving room for a late race push. By lap 19, he had created enough of a gap to drop into clean air behind Tsunoda once the penalty was served. The pit stop was flawless. The crew nailed the tire change. Piastri served the 10-second hold and rejoined in P11. From there, it became a masterclass in disciplined recovery. He overtook Gasly, Alonso, and Zhou with surgical precision, never locking a wheel, never scrubbing the tires. His race engineer kept him calm and informed, feeding him gap deltas and ERS targets without panic. The car balance, despite earlier contact, held together. McLaren's setup was working and Piastri was executing like a season title contender. What stood out wasn't just his pace, it was his restraint. Lesser drivers would have overdriven the car trying to make up time. Piastri didn't. He adapted to the loss. He respected the degradation curve and maximized DRS zones. At one point, his sector 2 times matched those of Norris in clear air. That kind of form, under that kind of pressure, sent a message not just to McLaren, but to everyone watching. This wasn't a rookie drive. This was resilience at the highest level. Behind the scenes, McLaren's data analysts were livid. The FIA's initial decision had not only cost them a possible 18-point result, it had also forced them into a race-saving strategy on the fly. The penalty meant they couldn't double-stack their cars without sacrificing one. It compromised Norris' stop timing too. The engineers ran 3 separate simulations, and in all of them, Piastri would have comfortably secured P2 had the penalty not been applied. That's how much was lost in strategy, in pace, in championship leverage. But they adapted. They recovered. And even with all the obstacles, Piastri brought the car home in P5, a drive that, in hindsight, may go down as one of the most underrated of the season. Not because it won a race, but because it proved something far more important, that Oscar Piastri can lead under pressure, adapt under fire, and bounce back with the patience of a veteran. And now, with the FIA's apology validating his instincts, he heads into the final 3 races not just fighting but believing. With just 3 rounds remaining, the 2025 Formula One World Championship now hangs on the smallest of margins. The title fight is a 3-way war. Lando Norris leads with 390 points, Oscar Piastri sits second with 366, and Max Verstappen lurks in third with 341. Brazil was supposed to tighten that gap, but instead, Piastri lost critical ground. And now, as we head into the final flyaway leg, every single point gained or lost could decide the title. The FIA may have apologized, but the math doesn't care about apologies. Let's be clear. Had Piastri avoided that 10-second penalty now publicly deemed a mistake, he would have likely finished in second place at Interlagos. That's 18 points instead of the 10 he took for finishing 5th. An 8-point swing that would have closed the gap to Norris to just 16 instead of 24. That margin means Norris can afford a bad race. Piastri? He needs 3 near-perfect weekends and at least 1 Norris slip-up. And with Verstappen charging, there's no margin left for second best. But numbers only tell part of the story. What Brazil really changed was momentum. Before Interlagos, Piastri was on a hot streak, out-qualifying Norris in Mexico, fighting hard in Austin, and proving his consistency. But the penalty disrupted that rhythm. It forced him to defend rather than attack. And now, even with the FIA admitting fault, Piastri carries a different weight, the burden of proving that he's not just fast, but deserving. That's a mental load few drivers handle well. But Piastri? He seems to be using it as fuel. Internally at McLaren, the dynamic is evolving. Norris may lead the points, but Piastri has won respect. His drive in Brazil, combined with how he handled the media, the stewards, and the chaos, has raised his standing within the team. He's not just the second car anymore. He's a title threat. And that changes the energy in the garage. It changes how strategy calls are weighed. It changes how engineers prepare simulations and prioritize updates. And it changes how Norris races, because now, the pressure isn't only from Verstappen. It's from the other side of the garage too.